Welcome back, folks. MTG Joe here, and we are here for another installment of the MTG Arena weekly meta breakdown. This is for both standard best of 1, best of 3, as well as historic best of 1, best of 3. As always, we get all our ladder information pulled in from Untapped GG. It's a companion tool that runs alongside Arena, free to use, tracks all your games. Highly recommend it if you are looking to elevate your game. I have a link in the video description down below. If you click that, just lets them know that I sent you from the channel. But really what we try to do here is just kind of highlight week over week what has been changing, what are the top decks in each format, and we generally try to look at diamond to mythic rank with population size large enough. So we're looking at this from October 24th to Halloween, October 31st, 1 week sample size for standard, starting it off, best of 1. We have 180,000 match sample size, so much bigger than your friends, oh, we have 2 games, stuff like that. So we look at the actual distribution, and we have kind of a tie at the top decks. Mono white, mono green, both at 62.6%. Notably, so we see some variations deck to deck, and really what we see with mono green this particular week is they've gone back to Briarbridge Tracker, and they are on the 4 Ren 4 Eska Chariot with the token mix. Notably, they're also playing Outland Liberator main. So they went off the Sculptor of Winter plan as the 2-mana accelerant, and they're opting to go with this. This version here has Rangers class, no inscription in the main, but opting for Blizzard's Brawl. So they're going a little bit bigger with the Ren and 7, a little bit grindier of a deck. And then with mono white, there's kind of 2 variations you commonly see. There's this version here, which I deem the Exile version, which is the one I prefer more. And then there's the cast 2 spells with like Monk of the Hidden Class. So the Exile version is usually playing Stonebinder's Familiar, which gets larger as the game goes on. You have Sun Gold Sentinel, which exiles cards. And then you have the removal package of Brutal Cathar, Skyclave Apparition, and Portable Hull. Also plays some copies of Maul of the Skyclave to just kind of go over the top of your opponent. What we see coming in third this week is the Azorius control deck. This one's actually kind of interesting. We're seeing more creatures. We've seen some creatureless versions. This is an Alrun's version that's playing Lier. You have Ilmarith, and then some copies of Professor Symbology. Symbology could block early as well as fetches you like your environmental sciences, your win cons, or your card draw. For quick grinding, you can see like 6 minutes, 5.5 minutes, 10 minutes on average. So a deck that's going to take you a little bit longer, but if you're liking control, this seems to be the kind of go-to right now. Mainly because with the counter spells, it lets you play a little bit better against the Izzet decks, whereas if those mono black Blood on the Snow decks, like the base ones, extremely good against creature decks, suck usually against these control decks. So we see another version of the mono white Exile. Notably, this version's not on the Mauls, but has the Redains in the main. We see our variations of Izzet pretty much at 60%. We have the Turns version, looking to play no creatures and winning through Galvanic Iteration, as well as copying Alrun's Epiphany. And really kind of the variations with these decks you usually see is their decision on which sweeper to play. So either it's Burn Down the House, which deals with Planeswalkers, or there's Battle of Frost and Fire. The upside of Battle of Frost and Fire is you can bounce it back to your hand and reset it with Divide by 0, so you can kind of repeatedly board wipe for a couple turns. And then we see the Dragons list, which is basically you got the Egg, you got the Goldspan. If you are playing aggro decks, be mindful, a lot of them are playing Cinderclasm main. We're seeing in both these versions for like the mono white matchup to be able to hit those pretty easily. Both on Shatterskull. So just the Dragons is on Shatterskull. So it's just these little like niche cases of things when you're playing best of 1. The better idea you have, the more likely you are to play around certain instances. What the hell does this card do? Okay. Just some of the inclusions in the sideboard is always interesting. Mono black control, we played a Bractos version the other day, which we really liked. This deck here, very good against the mono white decks, very good against the green decks, struggles against the turns-based decks. Mentioning the Azorius control deck, this is the version that plays no creatures and looks to win from boredom of Devious Cover-Up Loops, one of Hall of Storm Giants, or one of Mascot Exhibition. So it's a slower deck, 11 minutes. We see Gruul Werewolves. This one is actually playing up to Tovolar. This is something we have to revisit. We haven't played this deck in a while. They are playing the Snow package for the Frostbite Blizzard Brawl. This was a deck we played early in a Strad Standard. I liked it, but kind of got outclassed by the bigger green decks. We have Rakdos Control, which is a slightly different build. I was playing Immerstorm. This is a creature hover. I would probably classify this Rakdos Treasure. It's hard to name a control deck when you have 27 creatures in it. We see Bant Party, another variation of mono green. Temur Ramp, which is basically Gruul's Splash Negates. And then just looking through, seeing Golgari Control, just a Golgari version of the Blood on the Snow deck. We see Goblins, we see Boros Dragons. Not doing too hot. It's just kind of like a Boros aggro style deck. This isn't Dragons. I'd say this is Boros Burn, Boros aggro. We have Magecraft and Clerics. So this Cleric deck is the one Crokies was playing. It doesn't seem to be doing that hot in best of 1. So popping over to best of 3, and we have pretty much a pretty impressive rate, 68%. Winning 2/3 of its matches, mono green aggro, mono green stompy. So we see in this version they are playing the Sculptor of Winters, playing the Primal Adversary, notably for the trample effect to get over the birds. Late game mana sink. So you're seeing the 6 accelerants on 2, no Jaspera Sentinel, 5 fight spells main. Sorry, they're only playing. 7 fight spells main, 1 Snakeskin Veil. The art confused me. We have mono white aggro also coming in here. This would be kind of the it's a little bit of a hybrid. It's got the cast 2 with some of the exile effects. What we're seeing more is the Brutal Cathars over Skyclave Operation. Reason being is this can tag tokens, and against a lot of the Izzet decks, at least this flips and makes them pay life with Ward. This doesn't really do much against the Izzet deck, so this could get a little bit larger. Also against like Ren tokens, this is better. Mono green, just another variation, and then we have Izzet Dragons. These are the top decks right now in Diamond. If we drop it down, like Diamond Mythic, if we drop it a little bit further, we see Jund Dragons, Jund Treasure. It's basically a Rakdos deck Splash Chariot. This version seems to be doing pretty well in itself. Notably no Jaspera Sentinel. I generally don't like Magda in decks without Jaspera, but seems to be putting up a fairly decent win rate. You can tap Magda to the Chariot, but that's really turn 4. We have the Izzet Dragon decks doing well, and then Esper Control at 55%. So this looks like a Sedgemoor Lear deck. So it's basically Dimir Splash Vanishing Verse in terms of a deck. So probably the closest thing to new decks. We've seen this like Lier deck, stuff like that. I think from the SEG tournament, we'll pull that up later, but SEG was predominantly blue-based turns decks in the finals. So MTG Melee, the kind of aggregator of all the online tournaments, they had the Red Bull Untapped. So this is our large-scale tournaments. This one is Japan time. So we have the Japan time zone, so it's like Asia time zone. I think the previous one was European, and this one had 761 players. So we have an interesting breakdown. We have mono white aggro, which is a deck we saw. We're looking at the exile based version. We have Izzet Epiphany. Is this the turns based one? It is. And then this deck was actually pretty interesting, a Sultai midrange. So it's kind of a rampy control style deck. Mainly green-black. You have like Briarbridge Tracker, Tovolar, Tainted Emissary. I think it's the black one. Probably like the first play we're seeing of that particular card. This deck's actually pretty interesting to see how it plays out. Crippling Fear as a sweeper. So some interesting spice there. We have the Esper Control deck. This looks to be the Liera version that we saw in the previous breakdown. We have the mono greens. We have the Jund Treasure decks. I like this version better, where you're playing Jaspera Magda. It allows for more explosive draws, like a higher likelihood of turn 3 hitting a Goldspan Dragon. And the rest of the kind of matchups we see are what we're expecting. Temur Werewolves is basically the Gruul version with the counter spells in the sideboard. If we look at the deck distributions for the weekend, we see mono green, the heaviest represented deck with a 53% win rate. This includes mirror matches. Izzet Epiphany, 52%. Notably, we're seeing a decline in the tournament play in best of 3 for mono white. It tends to have a tough matchup at times against mono green, and depending on how Izzet builds their deck, the sweepers can be quite a bit of a problem. Notably, Jund Treasures had the best weekend, it looks like, of this tournament. Grixis Dragon. So these are like decent sized tournaments, 700 players. We're seeing representation of pretty much the top 4 decks of what we've been seeing, with some variations of Gruul / other colors, which for the most part, week to week, is what we've been seeing. So that's the Japan tournament. And now we're into Historic. So Historic best of 1, we had Memory Lapse banned, we had Trickery banned. So we're seeing kind of the meta reestablish itself, and kind of a deck from the past coming back. With Memory Lapse gone, there tends to be less control right now, so we're seeing less Jeskai. And what we're seeing is a prevalence of tribal decks coming back. So we see the Selesnya Angel deck. Nothing really unique about this. What you're trying to do, Bishop of Wings and the Righteous Valkyrie, gain a bunch of life, make a bunch of tokens, and kind of just grind out the creature mirrors. It tends to go over the top. 4 toughness is really relevant in a lot of these matchups. So we see that. We see Elves coming out. Both these decks are incredibly soft to sweepers. So that's something where the Angels isn't as hit hard by Anger of the Gods. Elves, you can hit pretty early with a well-timed Anger of the Gods, but Wrath of God, Shadow's Verdict does a number against these decks. So that might be a way going into next week of how to target the best of 1 meta, going with a sweeper deck with some sort of graveyard hate in it, I'd say. We see Mono Red Madness. This deck has kind of been around the fringes. We've seen some versions of it. We see Squirrel Twin, Selesnya Squirrel combo. This is a slightly different version than the one I'm playing, but kind of same concept. So if you haven't seen this deck, it's an infinite token, infinite life, infinite counter deck with a lot of clicking on Arena. But basically any combination of Heliod, Scurry Oak, and a creature that gains life on entering. So Lunarch Veteran, Soul Warden, or Prosperous Innkeeper. So what happens is you gain a life with Heliod, you put a counter on Scurry Oak. Scurry Oak reads whenever 1 or more counters is put on it, you create a squirrel, which then gains you of life that you put a counter on it, and you repeat. So we have a video on that if you do want to check it out. It's a really fun combo, and it really just allows you to go over the top, but it is very click intensive. There's no demonstrative loop. We have Mono Red Aggro, which we've been seeing. It's the Embercleave version with the Reckless Ringleaders. And the deck, we'll talk to in a bit. Gruul Shamans. I've been playing a lot of this deck. Really liking it. And I've made some variations. I'll show you my deck list in a sec. But that's the one that I just finished 585 Mythic with for the end of October. So Gruul Shamans, just going over the top with stuff like Harmonic Prodigy to double triggers, Rage Forger, put a bunch of counters, and ping a bunch of times. We see a Burn list come up, Phoenix list come up, just seeing if there's any new spice. The Humans list. There's Niv. I found Niv to be pretty terrible playing, but that's another version. So the version I'm playing, so I'm 35 and 12 with the deck. So for sample size, 6 and 3, 9 and 3, 12 and 2. So I was 23 and 8. Sorry, just doing some math. So I was 20 and 3 and 8 with the Gruul version that we saw there. And I made some changes along the way, and I actually converted it to Jund list. And I went with Judith Scourge Diva. It is a shaman, and we're able to do this with the effect of Unclaimed Territory naming shaman, and we have once... did not catch my other land. I have 1 Overgrown Tomb. So we have 1 Overgrown Tomb in there. So Judith adds a couple bits of resiliency. It's a sweeper insurance. If they sweep our board with anything other than Anger of the Gods, we get a bunch of pings. Those pings trigger double trigger with the Harmonic Prodigy. And then this is another way to have a Lord style effect. So we have Rage Forger. This is another way for our things to get bigger. It also lets us kind of have pseudo removal in the deck by being able to ping. Outside of the deck, we've been just kind of playing around with the numbers. I went down to 3 Seasoned Pyromancers, as sometimes you just end up draw 2, discard 2, draw 2, discard 2, draw 2, discard 2, but not really getting ahead card advantage wise if you still have cards in hand. So I've kind of been trimming along the edges. I went down some Shatter Skull Smashings. I was very seldomly using this as actual removal, so it ended up just being pay 3 life to myself to have an untapped land. But this deck, like you see, we just kind of finished up the season. I went 9-3, 12-4 with the Jund version to close out the season. We finished 586 on the ladder, so this is definitely a good deck. The decks I'm struggling the most with right now are Angels, where I've had a couple close ones against, but the life gain is hard to race, as well as the Jeskai Dragonstorm combos. So the ones that are, so it's either Jeskai, red, white, Mardu, 4 colors. So it's kind of grouped in between here and here. Those ones there just kind of focus on milling yourself, casting Mizzix Mastery to either target Emergent Ultimatum to combo out with Dragonstorm or Dragonstorm itself. So it's an infinite loop combo and you basically die on the spot. We don't have Graveyard Hate or stuff like that. And it tends to be a little bit hard to race depending if they can get it off on turn 3. So that's the deck I've been playing the most. I'll probably ladder up again with it for the next season. And then looking at the historic best of 3 meta, Selesnya company lists, so human companies, have had the strongest results. We see 2 for right now, just slight variations along. We're seeing Adeline make more of an impression, different numbers of Brutal Cathar, but relatively similar win rates. There is a prevalence of sacrifice decks, so I think we're back on your Sharn in the sideboard. Some numbers does a really good job there. I personally don't like Containment Priest. It doesn't do much in most of the matchups where you care about Graveyard Hate. You rather just have removal or stuff like that. It also screws up your own collected company. You're better off just playing like Rest in Peace, in my opinion. I've liked the Gideon more, just as ways to combat control. We see Madness, we see Arcanist come in. Anything new, fresh, unique? Interesting to see the Chain Whirlers. I guess for the mono white matchup, you'll have a lot of X1s to start off with, so trades pretty well. Arcanist seems like nothing super innovative. We're seeing a Go Blank main, so something just to be mindful of. The Shaman's list just ported over to best of 3. We have Niv, Jund Food, and then Phoenix itself. So one deck I do want to pull up, it's not showing up here, but this deck has been very popular the last week or so, at least in the top. So the Nerdy Steve, another content creator, has been hovering. He's just couldn't get to number 1, but he was up in the high numbers. So this is a Golgari Sacrifice deck. I believe JS2, another player, high-level player, was number 1 earlier this month with it. And there's slight variations, but in essence, it's a Cat Oven Squirrel deck, Turbo Squirrel, with Ravenous Squirrel to get big. You have Witch's Oven, Cauldron Familiar to kind of loop, with Meat Hook Massacre as a board wipe, as well as just another way to drain, card advantage with Trail of Crumbs, and then just kind of going from there. So I'll have a video up on this as well in the next couple days. It's a fun deck. It is a very big brain deck, I would say. A lot of thinking. Would not recommend playing this late at night when I was trying to play it. It's your sequencing and timing and everything is very, very much impactful. But that's kind of the week that it is. If we look at going back to my profile, kind of messed around with some stuff. Haven't played super amounts, but closed it out with Gruul. The Blood on the Snow, just kind of fooling around. White Exile still tends to be pretty good. And just kind of playing around. I think like we actually tried with decks. We had pretty good win rates, 74%, 76%. I still think Zombies is a deck to explore in Historic. Just kind of playing around the edges, but yeah, let me know what you think as always with these weekly meta breakdowns. If I missed out any decks that you're seeing on the ladder. And as always, if you can, drop a like, comment, and subscribe. It goes a long way to helping out the channel. It costs you absolutely nothing. And it helps me just kind of grow the channel. As you can tell by the boxes, I'm currently moving, so content's a little bit slower these days. I usually try to get out a video once a day. But obviously with half my setup being in boxes right now, it's a little hard right now, but should be back to regular production come mid to end of December. Appreciate everyone stopping by today. We'll catch you next time and have a great one.